At the heart of traditional solution development is the concept of features. And features are XML files that provision functionality to sites. All sorts of different functionality. And that's why it has such a generic name, features. So it's the basis of almost everything that you see in a SharePoint site. Not everything, but most things. In the context of a site collection or a subsite, features are activated or deactivated via the site settings page. All right, so let's take a look at some features in a team site, and I will also show you where the XML files are on the disk and what they look like. Okay, so here we are on a team site, and a team site starts off with this getting started web part, and if you look at the settings link here at the bottom is a link that says getting started, and if you click it, it takes you to the getting started page called get started with your site, and you can turn this on and off. So if we go into the site settings page and we go to manage site features, we will see that there are all sorts of features that we can choose from. Most of them are not activated. And what we're going to do now is deactivate one. So we'll find they're in alphabetical order, so they're after following content is getting started. And if I click deactivate, it's going to warn me. And I'll say, yeah, I really mean to do that. And now, if I come to the settings link, the getting started link is no longer there. And if I come back down and reactivate getting started, the link will reappear. Now, some features are not really meant to be activated, deactivated, reactivated, and deactivated. This is a good example of one, because what this feature has in it is a web part page with some web parts on it. And when you deactivate it, it does not delete the page. And when you reactivate it, it just adds another web part into it. So I could actually make these multiply as much as I wanted by clicking activate and deactivate. Now, this feature is located in a special place on the disk called the 15 hive. Now, the 15 hive is where the SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 15 files are located. In SharePoint 2007, we called this the 12 hive because that's what the number was that they used. When SharePoint 2010 came out, we decided to stop calling it a hive and started calling it the SharePoint root. However, we're back to the hive name because one of the things that they've done in SharePoint 2013 to make it easier to upgrade is that they have retained the 14 hive and added a 15 hive. So the 14 hive has all of the old 2010 features and files, and the 15 hive has all the new hot SharePoint 2013 features and files. And if you deploy an old solution that you targeted for SharePoint 2010, it'll put the files in the 14 hive instead of into the 15 hive, but everything will still work. All right, so this is all located, let's show this in the title bar, at C Program Files, Common Files, Microsoft Shared, Web Server Extensions 15, which is a lot of navigation to do, so I always put a toolbar here on my taskbar so that I can get to it easily. And inside of here, there is a folder called Template. And inside of Template, there is a folder called Features. And you can see that there are a lot of features in a stock SharePoint Server installation, 409 to be exact. So if we scroll down here to the letter G, there is a feature called Getting Started. And if we open this up, we can see that it consists of an XML file called Feature. This is called the Feature Manifest. And the Feature Manifest describes what the feature is. And so there's a resource file for the title and description. It says that this is scoped to web, which means that it targets an individual site as opposed to a site collection, and that it's got some code that runs when it gets activated. and then it's got this other file which describes the actual implementation of the feature, which is called elements.xml. This file is called an element manifest, and what it contains is a type of feature element called a module, which is used to deploy a page to a site. And the page that this one deploys is gettingstarted.aspx. Not only does it deploy Getting Started ASPX, but it also adds a web part onto the page. So this is why, when I deactivated the feature and reactivated it, that the web part just got added again, because this feature did not have behavior on deactivate to delete the page. And then there's another kind of feature element in here called a custom action, and this is what causes the Getting Started link to appear on the Site Actions menu. Now, this may seem really, really complicated, and in fact it is. Back in SharePoint 2007, we had to really understand all this stuff well, even to get started with SharePoint development, where everything went, what the formatting was. Visual Studio 2010 made it quite a bit easier, and Visual Studio 2012 makes it even easier still. Developing solutions with Visual Studio 2012 is a real pleasure, especially compared to when I started doing SharePoint development back in 2007. To use Visual Studio 2012, you need to install it, and then you need to add the Microsoft Office Developer Tools for Visual Studio. These are not on the Visual Studio disk or the Visual Studio ISO. They are available from the Web Platform Installer. And so you just open up the Web Platform Installer. You may need to install it ahead of time, and then do a search for Office Developer Tools, and you'll find it and you'll install it. And once you've done that, it will add support for SharePoint solutions and apps. Now, if you're going to use Visual Studio to develop SharePoint solutions, you're going to need to do it on a SharePoint server, a place where SharePoint is installed. If you're going to use Visual Studio to develop apps, you don't necessarily have to be on the server. All right, so let's get started using Visual Studio 2012. So here we have a virtual machine that has already been configured with Visual Studio 2012 and all of the additional setup that is necessary to do app development, which is extensive. But the first step that I always need to do is to install the developer tools into Visual Studio, which I've done already, but I'm still going to walk you through the process. So to do this, I'm going to need to run the Web Platform Installer, and so you may need to install the Web Platform Installer ahead of time. And once I have the Web Platform Installer open, then I just need to go up here to the search box and type Office. And what I'm looking for are the Microsoft Office Developer Tools for Visual Studio 2012. So I just need to select that, click Install, and let it do its thing. And after that, I'm good to go. So when I open up Visual Studio 2012, and I go to create a new project, I will see an Office/SharePoint selection, and it's going to have apps, Office add-ins, and SharePoint solutions available to me. And there are quite a few different project templates that are available for me with SharePoint 2013. So I can create an empty project, which is usually what I start with on a big complicated project. If I am stuck in the past, I can create a Silverlight web part, but as you know, Silverlight is dead. I can create visual web parts. I can import solution packages, which we're going to do in just a second. You can also import reusable workflows, and there are templates for SharePoint 2010 as well underneath this. So what I'm going to do is show you one way that you can get started with feature development. And I have already taken a team site, saved it as a template, which is done through the site settings page, and downloaded that solution package from the solution gallery into my downloads folder. So here in downloads, I have a file called export.wsp. All right, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick import solution package, and usually these are transitory temporary projects that I use. So in other words, I import it into one project and then I copy the stuff I need into the actual project that I'm working in. So I'll leave this called WSP import project 1 and I will choose OK. Now the next step is I need to specify the site that I want to use for debugging and the type of solution that I'm going to build. Since this was a template that was saved, it's always compatible with both of these, and so I'm going to skip making a decision about the solution type at this point. And I'll click Browse, find my solution package, and click Next. And after I do that, Visual Studio is going to open up that file and go through all of the stuff that's inside of it. And when it's done, it's going to display all of it and give me the chance to select the things that I actually want to bring in. And so you can see that there are content types here. This is mostly stock stuff that wouldn't be of interest in most cases, but I'm going to go ahead and bring everything in. So we have content types, we have fields, lots and lots of fields, we have list instances, we have modules, we have some receivers, and we have a web template. So this is not all of the different types of feature elements are available, but this is many, many of them. So between this and what is in the SharePoint root, without going out to the internet or the SDK for any sort of documentation, I have lots of examples about how to go about creating different things that I might need in my SharePoint site. All right, and when this completes, it tells me that the import completed successfully. So I can click OK here and then start looking at the different things that I can work with. Now, Visual Studio 2010 really added some nice features for SharePoint developers that were just revolutionary, huge advances over the really bad tools that we had with 2007. In 2012, they've made these tools even easier to use for the beginner. So I'm going to take a look at this list instance called Master Page Gallery. And when I open this up, instead of getting an XML file, I actually get a view that lets me select which columns are in the list and their types and different properties about the columns. I don't have to edit any XML. I can specify and design views that I want to create. And I can specify the list properties itself. Now, if I know what I'm doing and I decide that I really, really would like to work with the XML directly, I can do that. So for somebody who's brand new to SharePoint development, they've made it simpler, which is a big theme in SharePoint 2013, not just for users, but also for developers. Traditional SharePoint development is all about creating farm solutions. And a farm solution is a web solution package. This is a kind of cabinet file whose extension is WSP. So you can rename any of these to .cab and actually open them and explore and see what's inside of them. A web solution package that is a farm solution is installed to the file system, which requires administrative access. Now, because it goes to the file system, it can affect really anything about the SharePoint farm, which makes it by far and away the most powerful and flexible type of solution that you can build for SharePoint. Conversely, it is also by far and away the most dangerous type of solution that you can build for SharePoint, because you can really wreck an entire farm if you don't know what you're doing. All right, so let's jump over to Visual Studio and build a very simple farm solution, and I'll show you what happens when you install it. Okay, so here we are in Visual Studio, and what I'm going to do is come up to the File menu and choose New Project. And I'm just going to create an empty SharePoint 2013 project, and we'll call this Application Page, because that's what I'm going to make. An application page is a kind of page that gets installed to the file system, and it becomes globally available within the Layouts virtual directory for every site in our SharePoint farm. So we'll call this application page and choose OK. Now, this particular thing that I'm going to build can only be built as a farm solution, and so I'm going to choose Deploy as Farm Solution and click Finish. Now this is an empty SharePoint project, so at the moment it doesn't have anything in it. And so let's go ahead and add a new item. And this is going to be an application page. And you can see it tells me right here in the description that this is a farm solution only item that I'm going to create. So we'll call this my page. And I will choose Add. And what we can see here in the Solution Explorer is that it has added this folder called Layouts, and underneath it a folder called Application Page, which is the name of my project, and then the actual My Page. This is what is called a SharePoint mapped folder. And so this corresponds to the folder Template Layouts on the actual file system. So when I deploy the solution, it's going to create a folder called Application Page in this folder, Layouts, and that folder is going to contain mypage.aspx. All right, so here for main, we'll just put some welcoming text. I haven't done a Hello World demo, so we'll use Hello World so that I can continue to maintain my union credentials for the Presenters Guild of America. There is no such thing, but if there were, this would be a requirement. And I'm going to come up here to my solution, or rather my project, and right-click it and choose Deploy. And if we look at the output here, we can see that it added the solution, then it deployed it, and then that was all there was to it. Now if we come over to the SharePoint root and go to Template Layouts, we can see that there is now a folder here called Application Page and a page inside of it called My Page. And because this is a farm solution, any of these folders that you see here, I can deploy files to. So I can really go to town on the SharePoint install. I can create HTTP modules, I can create timer jobs, I can take over the entire farm if I want to. I can see this solution if I go into SharePoint Central Admin. And on the System Settings page, I can see under Manage Farm Solutions that I've deployed a solution called applicationpage.wsp. And this is a pretty simple solution. It just has that one page which just has some text on it. But I can get to it from anywhere in the _layouts virtual directory. So the name of this folder was Application Page. And the name of this page was mypage.aspx. And there it says Hello World. Sandbox solutions are just like farm solutions in that they are web solution packages, but instead of being deployed directly to the file system, they go into the content database, and then any code inside of the Sandbox solution runs inside of a restricted Sandbox process. And that restricted Sandbox process has access to far fewer server-side APIs than are available with the farm solution. And because they cannot deploy any files to the file system, anything that would require access to the file system, like an application page, is not possible in a Sandbox solution. The biggest difference, aside from what's happening under the covers and the restrictions that are put in place, is that site owners can deploy Sandbox solutions. So they do not require the administrator to run any sort of processes in order to deploy the solution. It does require the administrator to turn on the ability to use Sandbox solutions, but once that's done, if you're a site owner and you have a Sandbox solution that is valid, you can deploy it. Now, like I said, most of the server-side APIs are not available. What you get in a Sandbox solution on the server side is a subset of the core SharePoint Foundation object model. You don't get access to search or manage metadata or publishing or any of the assemblies that come with SharePoint Server. Well, that said, in SharePoint 2013, there are much more robust set of JavaScript APIs, and so it's possible for you to still get a lot of the functionality. You just have to run it in the client. The main thing that you need to know about Sandbox solutions in SharePoint 2013 is that they are deprecated. Now, what deprecated means is that they are available, that they are supported, but they are not guaranteed to be supported in the future, right? So when Microsoft or anybody else says that a piece of their software is deprecated, they're giving you fair warning that in some future version they may no longer be available. Now, there are some folks out there who said, well, they're not really deprecated, but Microsoft has been extremely unambiguous on this point. However, if you need to do something in an app or some other scenario that would require you to do a Sandbox solution today in order to meet a user's requirements, you should consider that you may need to do that. And finally, Microsoft has said publicly but not documented that what really is deprecated about Sandbox solutions is server-side code, but that they may continue to support features that do things like deploy files and create lists indefinitely as part of Sandbox. All right, let's move over to a server, and what we're going to do is turn on the user code service, and then we'll create a very simple Sandbox solution to create a list instance. All right, so we're going to build a simple Sandbox solution right now, and to do that I need to actually turn on the Sandbox service in my farm. And so to do that, I can go to the Manage Services on Server page under System Settings in Central Admin, and then down here we have the Microsoft SharePoint Foundation Sandbox Code Service, and I need to start that. If I don't have this running, then Visual Studio will not deploy my Sandbox solution for me, even if the Sandbox solution does not contain any code. Once that's turned on, I can go to Services and see that the SharePoint user code host is started. All right, that's very important because this is not turned on by default by any of the wizards. You have to do this by hand or with PowerShell. All right, so now I'm going to open up Visual Studio 2012. And I'm going to create a new project. And this time we will once again create a SharePoint empty project. And this is going to be called Sandbox List. So the thing that I'm going to make here is a simple list instance. And I can do that by going to the project and adding a new item. And I'm going to choose the list item template. And I'm going to call this my list because I'm not feeling very creative. All right, so there's my list. So when you create a list in Visual Studio 2012, this wizard starts up, and you can create a list instance based on one of the stock list templates that are available on the site to which you're doing your deployment. Or you can create a customizable list based on one of the stock ones. Or you can create a non-customizable list, which is just a list instance based on any of the available list templates. So what I'm going to do is create just a simple custom list, and I'm going to click Finish. The difference between those two choices is if I choose to create a customizable list, the columns and view tabs are going to light up, and I can actually specify columns and views for my list. But in this case, I just can specify the title of the list, the kind of list it's going to be, and whether or not I want it on my quick launch. Once again, I can actually look at the XML if I so choose and edit it to my heart's content if I know what I'm doing. And when I added this, in addition to my list, it added a thing called Feature 1. And Feature 1 represents the feature manifest for the overall feature that contains my list. And so if I double click on this, we get another designer. And I can give this a name. And this is what's going to appear on the Manage Features page as the title and description. So I can give it a title, I can give it a description, I can even give it a thumbnail image if I want. Lots of things that I can specify about it. Right now, if we were to deploy this, and I'm going to rename this as well over here. If we were to deploy this, then what we would get would be a custom list called My List. It would have one field in it visible called title, and life would be good. But I can also do some additional work on this by using what is called a feature event receiver. So I'm going to right-click on the feature here, and I'm going to choose Add Event Receiver. And it gives me a C# class. If I was using the VB template, it would give me a VB class. And there are a series of different events that I can respond to. So the one I'm going to respond to is activated. And so when this feature activates, it's going to first create the list, and then it is going to call feature activated. And this feature targets a web. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable, which is going to represent my web, and I'm going to say that it is equal to a cast of spweb properties, which is this argument here passed into the event handler, feature parent. This feature is a web feature, and so its parent is an spweb. And then I'm going to get the list. So I'm going to get this from the list collection of the web, and it's going to take the title of this list, which is My List. And then I could do things to the list. So I could say that I want the list to not allow RSS feeds. So we'll say list allow RSS feeds equals false. And do any additional configuration that I want. I might, oh, that one is read-only. Well, that's what I get for picking one at random. Let's see. Over here, we said that this list was going to be on the quick launch. And so over here, what we'll do is we'll say the list is not going to be on the quick launch. And then I'm going to save my change. Now this is a pretty typical scenario. Not that I would say put it on the quick launch and then take it off of the quick launch, but it's a pretty common scenario for SharePoint developers to create a basic list of a particular type and then use feature activated to do additional configuration against the list. Often because it is easier to programmatically do these kinds of operations than it is to declaratively do these kinds of operations. So we might add fields to it, we might define views, we might bind a content type, all sorts of things that might be done programmatically that are just a little easier for most people than using even the designer in Visual Studio once they're comfortable with the technology. All right, so let's just come up here and click Start and see what happens. So I'm going to try to get the output window open here. And so we can see first it talked to the SharePoint Sandbox code service, and then it added the solution, and then it deployed the solution, and then finally it's going to activate the feature. And after it's done all that, it's going to, because I hit Run, it's going to open up the browser. And if I had something like a web part, it would give me the ability to debug it. Now, we see My List under Recent because it was recently created, but it's not appearing out here as a main heading. If we come over to the list itself, there it is. It has no items inside of it. Maybe that would be something else that I might do either declaratively or in an event receiver. If we want to see where the solution went, we can just go to Site Settings, and under Solutions, under Web Designer Galleries, there is the Sandbox List feature. And I could deactivate it. I can download it if I want to another solution. I can even manage its resources, which is something that is an advantage of Sandbox solutions, that administrators can dole out a point system that specifies how much consumption of farm resources a particular solution is able to do in a site per day.